Come on, Soda Pop, let's go.
And he is the project manager for the section from Rice Street to to north of I-90. So after this, if you have any specific questions to a specific area, like Mark had said, we would like to answer them back there where we can point to it and have a little bit better dialogue. If there's general questions about the project in general, we can sure answer those after this. The goals of this is to, first of all, to review the environmental assessment. We'll go over where we were, where we are, and where we're going, I guess, basically. Then we will share the preferred alternative and some quick overview, basically an executive summary of how we got to that point. And then the number one thing that we're looking for is public comment on each of the segments or for the whole document. And we're looking for those either there's a comment card that's attached to the packet that you have. You can either leave them here tonight or you can mail them. Or I do have my email address, and then there's a website at the end of this PowerPoint that you can also contact or write the comments you have. I will remind or say it again at the end, if we do email, I'd like you to have the information that's on the comment card on the top of that included in the comment or in the subject line, just because it makes it easier to make sure it's included in the final document. Outline tonight on the presentation part of it is we'll go over a background of the project starting in 2003 when there was an original EA signed. And then the project purpose and need, Becky will take over with that, talking about the purpose and need of this project, the alternatives of the previous as well as where we're at today. Then Becky will talk about the environmental assessment of what we looked at for environmental concerns or issues along the corridor, the recommended preferred alternative, and then the next steps. Background. It even goes further back than what Mark and I have been tied into it. In 2003, an EA was signed along with the FONSI, or finding of no significant impact, for the entire corridor from I-29 at the T interchange and east and north to the Timberline interchange, and that was the entire, what they called at that time, the East Side Corridor. So that was signed, like I said, in 2003. In 2005, the DOT constructed that section that's that's in front of the target. That section was constructed in 2005 from Madison south to, I guess, south to 26th, or just south of 26th Street. Although from Arrowhead north, it was only built, half of that section was built at that time. Then in 2012, backing up, we split. There was at one time, or in 2011 and 12, we decided to split the project. Instead of the 2003 EA that was signed, we needed to split it. And the primary reason for the segment or the split was because in the north area, the City of Sioux Falls was, if you remember, looking at relocating the rail yard. With that, the potential of the site up here was in a conflict to where 100, or to the Highway 100 was going to be, and we felt that we just couldn't move forward with the northern segment of the document until that was resolved. So at that time we decided to split because the DOT wanted to construct the piece from 26th Street south to 57th, but would have been held up if we kept it all tied together. So in 2012 we split it up, and in 2012 we have an EA and a FONSI signed for this southern segment from I-29 east and north to just south of 26th Street. 2014, where we are today, we have an EA that's issued, an environmental document that's issued and available for public review and comment, and that's where part of this meeting is, to receive additional comments. We do ask that the comments received, and it'll be a little bit later too, by November 6th, so that we can include it in the document that goes to FHWA for their final review and final review of the document. With that, I'll turn it over to Becky to talk a little bit on the environmental side.
Thanks. Well, first I'm going to talk kind of generally through the EA process, or the environmental process, and then we're going to talk about each of these for the specific project. So when I'm looking through the EA process, we're looking at starting out with a study approach and scope, and as you can see, we're building upon it as we go. The next step is to come up with the purpose and need for the project. and then go into looking at the development of alternatives. Now, alternatives are different options of how we can go about constructing the project, and we also include a no-build that we're going to talk about. And then we take those alternatives and we start to look through and evaluate those. And after we've gone through evaluation, we send out an environmental assessment, as we have with this project at this step, to get you guys' feedback. And then from that feedback and those public comments and the document, then FHWA can make a decision and select an alternative. So let's talk through the steps here for this specific project. So remember, we're kind of building upon it as we go. The first step is really the purpose and need. And for this area, we know that there's going to be public and private infrastructure that's going to be going on here. And with that infrastructure, we know that we're going to need roadway systems, that in order to avoid deficiencies such as more capacity, issues with safety, and still provide access to the area, we're going to need this roadway. We also know that we're going to have to provide for that regional traffic growth. So making sure that this is what we hold to answering as we go forward with the project. So as we develop that purpose need, then we develop that range of alternatives. And you're going to hear us kind of talk about a no-build alternative and then build alternatives. And I'll talk through the no-build here in a little bit, but the no-build is listed there at the top. The rest of those, as we talk, you'll hear us refer to those as build alternatives, ones that were looked at to be constructed. So the first one, the no-build alternative, is always in play when we're working through a project. It allows us to provide for a no action taken. It also allows us to look at baseline conditions. If we didn't do the project, what would be the environmental impacts, and then comparing that to the different alternatives. For this project, that no-build alternative would mean that we would just have the existing roadways out there, only maintenance would occur to those, and that therefore this does not meet the purpose and need and would not provide that regional transportation infrastructure. And now I turn it back to Steve. He's going to talk through those build alternatives.
Can you hear me okay without the microphone? Does everybody in the back hear me okay? Okay. So all the alternatives, and I mentioned previously the 2003 EA or FONSI sign. This is that alignment. As you can see, the yellow. That one was selected in that FONSI from I-29 to I-90. And during a public meeting in 2006, we had a public meeting. Basically, the plan was to start moving forward on preliminary design and then corridor preservation for the entire corridor. At that meeting, we received comments from the public, primarily for the concern with regards to, is this truly what we're looking at, this corridor, is it a safe corridor? Because it was going to be, at that time, a 4-lane divided, or with a raised median in the middle, and it was design speed of 50 miles an hour, so posted at 45. Is that really, are we designing this to the safest, or to a safe level for the traveling public? Also, a lot of the intersections going through there were kind of at a skewed angle instead of a perpendicular. So we took that back from what the public had made the comments and revisited this. We looked at the corridor speed. Although we're not probably going to be posting it any faster, we looked at a design speed of 60 miles an hour versus the 50 mile an hour to make it safer for the traveling public. Most of the section, once development starts coming in the area, will be at that 45. So it just gives us a little more of a safety factor. Also, the intersections were looked at to straighten out to make them perpendicular, so it's safer for looking both directions as we cross the intersection, or in each of the intersections. The other thing is the traffic capacity. When we started looking at this, and the DOT was looking in their long-range plan of when they were going to construct this project, they looked at it, the traffic volumes for 2025 for this initial study, and we felt that we needed to look further out, and so we looked at 2035 volumes for projections to determine what type of a section we truly want, and that upgraded it from this, which was a 4-lane section, to an ultimately what we're constructing will be a 6-lane section. Now when we open it up, we'll probably only have 4-lane and we'll stripe off the outside, but as the traffic increases, then we have the capacity to add another lane for this corridor. The next alternative, based on those comments and that we received, we looked at and developed the revised build alternative, which is in the red. A couple of the benefits of this is we looked at this area, which again goes back to the city was looking at the possible location of this area up here for the rail yard. By shifting it to the east, we were avoiding that potential site, and so we didn't have to worry about spanning that. The other things that we did was we avoided this area here, which Cactus Hills, which is kind of a pristine area environmentally. We also, you can see, realigned 60th Street North because we wanted to avoid the floodway and not have it overtopped every time the Sioux River and Slip Up Creek comes through there, and we realigned that. We also, well, it says allows, in every one of the alternatives we have, every one of the major intersections will accommodate dual lefts in all directions to accommodate the traffic. The other one was this alignment was going over a floodway that was quite wide, which would require a 1,200 to 1,500 foot bridge to basically have zero impacts to the Sioux River. With this alignment, we were avoiding that, and we shortened it to a 500-foot bridge. Then, as we started moving forward and really planning the project out, when we initially set that the revised build alternative, we met with WAPA and Excel, which, as you can see, has a lot of big transmission lines. If anybody's been in the area, the big towers and everything, quite expensive to move. When we originally laid that out, we were avoiding most of the impacts, most of the towers, and most of having to adjust heights and stuff of their towers. However, during it was 8, 9, 10, and 11, when they had the rolling brownouts and the blackouts out east, basically the federal government became more stringent on what you can and can't do. The other, with utilities and when you want to power down. The other thing that they did was, through technology improvements and stuff, they increased the loads that was going through there. So when we designed it, we were looking at their max sag of their lines, keeping a vertical clearance, a safe vertical clearance. Well, when they increased their load, that dropped the sag, which means we would have to adjust and move a lot more of their power, their transmission lines, which really moved the cost way up and became something that we were concerned about with the excess costs, so we wanted to look at some additional alternatives as well. So then we developed 9 more alternatives after we met with the utility companies, 1 through 8 and 4A. And to determine to meet the project purpose and need, and then we carried forward for future environmental was 4, 4A, and 7. So we looked at those, or carried those forward to have a little more environmental analysis on those. Here is 4, is option 4. Alternative 4 is this magenta line. Alternative 4A is the blue line. Basically the difference is in this area here between the two alternatives, and it was a matter of how long do we follow the revised build alternative before we go. And the goal is basically with all the alternatives, we had some alternatives that were out here, but ultimately we looked at our best alignment would be back along Timberline to avoid the impacts to WAPA and Excel and to reduce our utility relocation expenses. So that's the difference between those two, and you can still see the revised. And then we basically put us back on that 2003 alignment, although we did keep the design speed up for the horizontal curves to maintain the 60 mile an hour versus the 50 that the 2003 EA had. The next one is alternative 7. It's tough to see, but it's that black. And basically what we did there was take it as far north as we could before we had to curve it back to get back onto the Timberline alignment and avoid the WAPA site right there, the building. Alternative 7, what we found was, although we were minimizing impacts to Cactus Hills, we were having a lot more impacts, or major impacts, to wetlands and waters of the U.S., which thereby, with those, the major difference between 4, 4A, and 7, with that's where we eliminated 7, or alternative 7.
Great, I'll talk through the environmental assessment of 4, 4A, and 7. So as Steve said, it's kind of been an evolution that you saw I'm walking through. And so once we moved forward with 4, 4A, and 7, we went through and did a full environmental assessment of those. The first thing we looked at, of course, is right-of-way acquisitions. We always try to avoid, especially residences, for acquisition. And this project, there's two unavoidable acquisitions. The first one is because of that floodway that Steve explained, and because also that we need to go perpendicular when we meet into SD100 with that realignment. So by all means, take a look at that on the board too. And then the second one was when we went back on Timberline, we have to widen the roadway there, and that's the other residence that was acquired. Of course, we try to avoid those, but we want to make sure we're clear on what the impacts of the alternatives are. The next is historic resources. We look through at historical structures, archaeology sites, and this project had a couple of important sites. One is a residence that is eligible for the National Register, which I was kind of talking a little bit earlier, and that just means that it has qualities that could make it listed to that register. And then also we have the two railroads, which in South Dakota, because of their importance in time, are cultural resources. The next is aquatic resources. What we mean by that is streams, intermittent areas, ponds, groundwater. And within this area, as you guys know, there's quite a few things out there. There's the Big Sioux River, there's Slip Up Creek, several different wetland areas that are kind of more special areas if you think about like the groundwater in charge or recharge in that area. So we had to look through the different impacts. So this is where we kind of saw a definer between alternative 4 and 4A and 7. Whenever we have alternatives that balance out for design, but one has a lot more wetland aquatic resource impacts, we pick the one that has the least amount of impact. So that was the case here. Alternative 7 was eliminated then and not recommended as the preferred alternative. And the next is we had also a lot of threatened and endangered species, which for me as an environmental person is interesting. Not as much for the designers, but Topeka Shiner, of course, inhabits some of the Big Sioux tributary areas, Slip Up Creek being one of those. So what that means is if we pull one of these build alternatives forward as chosen, as we go forward, then we'll have to look at certain design things for those crossings for the Slip Up Creek. We also had a potential for the Western Prairie Fringed Orchid, which is a flower. And in South Dakota, it can be found in different areas. So the stipulation in the EA is that we need to do a survey before we go into construction to ensure that that species is not out there. The third one of interest is the line snake. This is a state-listed species that is in this area. It's a very rare species, and it's found out quite a few times, been noted out in this area that inhabit it. So there's some things that we'll have to do, and noted in the EA is that we'll have to do a survey first, and then after that, if it's found or the habitat is found, there's certain things that we'll have to include for mitigation. One being maybe dry culvert crossings underneath the roadway, and another being a conservation easement to protect their habitat. So all of that coordination went into this project. And I'll turn it back over to Steve to talk between 4 and 4A.
Now we get back to the final two alternatives that we've narrowed everything down to, and you kind of get a feel for how and why we've eliminated, or option alternatives we've developed and why we've eliminated those, and down to the 4 and 4A. So this is our preferred alternative for alternative, which is alternative 4A. And starting here just south of Madison Street, you can see that we curve off of Powderhouse Road. That is for the reason of this, which is a gas line, a high pressure gas line. And with working through with the company, it was determined that they just did not want that road near theirs or over the top. We were thinking that we could bury it and they would be okay with that or comfortable, and they were just not comfortable at all with that road near that. That required us to curve it off to the east as we move north. And we'll point out that the black line here is a shared use path that will be built along with the project. So it starts off on the west side, which is what side it will be built on to the south through, I guess, south to Arrowhead before it switches over. But then it switches over and it'll be on the east side for the rest of the way, and that carries it all the way up to the interchange itself. With this, we will reconstruct the intersection of Madison Street and Maple Street, which will be part of that first project if you look at the separate slides on that. As I mentioned before, the typical section, which you can see on one of the boards back there, will be a 6-lane road curb and gutter section, very similar to what you see on that piece between 26th Street and Arrowhead Parkway. Going north, this right here, or again, this is for a 4, if you remember in this area, it curved out and went over the top of that gas line, which basically that was the main primary reason for eliminating the alternative 4, which brings us to our preferred alternative of 4A. Again, this multi-use path, in this area we are reconstructing or relocating Rice Street. The primary reason is, I guess you can somewhat see it, is Ellis and Eastern Railroad, which is going to be a grade separated crossing. To be able to get that grade and the elevation, we needed to shift Rice Street south to be able to get that separation and make things work. Mitigation measures that Becky had mentioned, that will be in this area here, and like she said, we're looking at some dry culvert crossings. We'll also have, the DOT puts the chain link, or puts fence along the right of way. In this area, we'll put fence, and then we'll have a mesh on the bottom of it so that the snakes cannot just crawl through. Because believe it or not, the #1 mortality for the line snake is going up on the pavement to warm themselves and then getting run over. So we're trying to, so we'll put the barriers on there to avoid that. Also, I should point out that there's a potential need for 750,000 cubic yards of material in this area because of, I've heard the comment several times, boy, you have quite the terrain you have to go through in this area. So, yeah, yes, we do. Finally, the north section, that will be starting, or basically from the Rice Street relocation, going north. We are realigning 60th Street North and Redwood Boulevard to make it a T intersection. Also, this avoids the floodway, which again keeps it out of the flooding situation that we would have, or that occurs currently on the existing. The interchange will be reconstructed to a single point, and the intersection will be on top, so it'll be exactly like 10th Street, although it'll be a little bigger, but that's 10th Street and 229. That'll give you a feel for what that intersection or interchange will look like. We do have 2 railroad crossings, overpasses. We will be a grade separated or a bridge over Ellis and Eastern, as well as the Big Sioux River. And then we have the bridge over the Big Sioux River. It will be combined bridge over the railroad tracks and the river. I mentioned before about the long bridge. We were able to shorten it because of impacts of removing that existing structure, which allowed us to open it up a little bit more to be able to shorten that bridge so we don't have that 1,500-foot bridge. Next steps, we have the EA was released for public comment on October 6th. The public information meeting we have tonight that we'll hopefully get some more great comments from. The final decision document will be in November. Our goal is for November of this year. And then we have the 3 projects. The tentative projects for Madison to Maple is 2015. Maple to Rice is in 17. And then Rice to I-90 in 2 years, 18-19, primarily because there's a lot of bridges and structures on that project where we'll need the 2 years. Here, the projects are in the STIP if you go online. There is a website on there that you can go online. I do want to point out right now the tentative price for each one of those, $11.5 for that Madison to Maple, $12.3 from Maple to Rice, and $42 million for that stretch from Rice to I-90. Again, comments, if you have any specific questions regarding a site or an area, we can sure answer those questions in the tables or at the boards. Comment forms available. Again, either leave them here or mail them, or you can email myself at the email address that's included in the packet. And I guess with that, I will turn it over if there's any specific or any general questions about the project. Yes?
At this point, Arrowhead to Madison is just a single 2-lane.
Yep.
Will that remain the same, and then will the next section still be divided?
Okay. The question was the stretch right now from Madison to Arrowhead is right now only half of it was constructed. The City of Sioux Falls right now has it in their plan
For 2017.
for 2017 to construct that piece. And then it'll be, the divided the section that you see from 26th Street, or from Arrowhead South. It'll be that same section going north. Yes?
Why don't you show me construction in 2016?
The question was, why isn't there any construction in 2016?
On the previous slide, you had.
Right, we have that 1 year. Is there any?
Just how the project scheduling and working through items. So, we got other priorities across the state, so just where the project fell in our step.
Will there be vehicular traffic through Timberline Drive during the construction of the new bridge and the grade separation between Madison and I-90?
Question is, will traffic be maintained during construction on Timberline from Rice Street to I-90? Is that, I don't know, Ben, has there been, the goal is to be able to maintain traffic, because we know that the businesses, especially north of the interstate, is very dependent on our construction season as well as their busy season. I don't know if it's officially what they've developed, and it's something that they're definitely striving for. Ben?
Yeah, we're looking at trying to keep that interchange open during construction. Hasn't been determined fully yet, but that's the goal.
I urge you to comment on that, because that would be important. The more comments we receive on the importance of that, because obviously the phasing construction adds dollars, and the state needs to balance the dollars versus the true, the ultimate need of keeping that piece open. So I do urge you, if if that's one that you're passionate about, to make that comment.
Well, businesses and residences and access to EROS are impacted.
Yep. Yeah, and we've had meetings, and there's going to be follow-up meetings of, we definitely see that as a major concern and how best we can phase that to keep traffic.
Come on, Soda Pop, let's go. Come on, let's go. Come on.